At first, this video was going to be directed towards Your Movie Sucks, but then I remembered one of the most important rules I adhere to. Bad is relative. Now, nothing I say in the rest of this video will ever justify that disgustingly awful Rise of the Planet of the Apes review he did, but it would be unprofessional of me not to admit that happens to be the worst and most certainly not the average of his content. But talking about Adam seems rather unheard of when comparing him to today's subject. I was introduced to that anime snob by a fan of mine. I guess he's a fan, not sure, but at least he watches my videos, so sorry if I mislabeled you. And what started out mildly enjoyable turned into an exceptionally awful experience, and that is what we are going to discuss today. Now, this video was originally discussing a very important topic to me, which is the more of an asshole you are when critiquing, the more correct you have to be. When you're a raging dick screaming about things and you're outright incorrect on something, it looks infinitely worse than it would on anyone else making a similar or even worse mistake. Hence the Your Movie Sucks video. It's the reason why I take extra precautions when I get super upset about crap to make sure I'm not saying something that would discredit me, which still happened when I reviewed Food Wars. But that anime snob is quite the exception. His best videos only barely beat out the Planet of the Apes video, and it leads to a horrible viewing experience. Since I'm retarded and didn't unsubscribe right away, I watched a constant trickle of awful content flood my feed, and it forced me to analyze it. And that was the end of it until he told me to go get raped. And go get raped I did. And before we actually get into this, I will say there is a possibility that he is nothing more than a troll. Now, the chances are not very high, but I don't underestimate people, and a slim chance is still a chance. The single most important concept when discussing the not snob is lazy. Absolutely everything about this channel is extremely lazy. From the videos themselves to even his username being lifted from another internet reviewer, absolutely nothing gives off the impression that any work was done. And what isn't lazy is incredibly stupid. And not in the haha funny way, but in the damn it he's a human and therefore he makes me look bad kind of way. The main problem I have is the length of his videos. Now every once in a while it'll jump up to 5 or 6 minutes, or maybe even a 10-minute video here and there. But without going through and actually figuring out, I'm going to guess the average length of his videos is around 2.5 minutes. Some of you might be asking, why does that matter? But if you have a brain in your head, you would know that explaining your points and elaborating tends to take time, and most of his shortest videos are on topics that would be shallow discussions of them if the videos were 10 minutes long, much less the 2 that are normally given. And when he starts getting into longer videos, like when he reviews an anime series, they're rarely more than 5 minutes. Which is why these videos are just him saying things. He makes claims and rarely backs them up. In his gangster review, he says the characters don't fit the setting, and then doesn't even mention how these two elements don't fit together, and simply references that Fist of the North Star did it better. Which doesn't help me understand your points. And unless you've already seen the show or read the manga, you can't even infer why or how he came to this conclusion. Did you see the timestamp on this video, Not Snob? The length of this video isn't because I want to hear the sound of my voice, it's because I present evidence to back up my claims. I try my best to explain why I have the perspective I have, and where I got my information from. Your videos, for the most part, are nothing more than a collection of bland bullet points, and even though your videos would get significantly worse if you had actually explained yourself, as it is now, it just comes off as being too much effort for you. And this is every video where he's the only one involved. I have seen a video of his that have other people doing the narration, and I found it extremely funny. When you make Watch Mojo seem like they put a lot more effort into their videos, you are one lazy bastard. His taking the snob's name is, although a less important factor in his incompetence, is just a sad reminder that the internet is filled with people lifting ideas from those that actually create. The cinema snob's entire shtick is being ignored just so he can be an asshole. Him being a snob is reduced to mindlessly insulting people, and that is not the pleb thing either. And he has this retarded cadence where he speaks quickly and then slows down to deliver this lazy insult, and this happens all the damn time. And the rest is him just insulting anime in a generic sense. Hell, I do that, and I'm no snob. There are so many intricacies to the cinema snob's character, and to see a ripoff of his basically be nothing more than a person calling other people plebs is more depressing than it ought to be. Then he reviewed 4 books in a week. Now, I don't know about you, but when I review something, I like to actually think about it for a bit and take my time with it. So the idea of reviewing 4 books in a week is something I'm not capable of, and not just because of time constraints, but because I want my real opinion out there and not just my gut reaction. So for the Not Cinema Snob's books reviews, and maybe his other reviews, I have to say that he does one of 3 things. He either doesn't read the books at all, he has read the books in the past and he's just recalling what he has read and making a review out of that, or he reads way too fast and just forgets most of the crap he has read. Because that is the only way it makes sense that he doesn't know how Ender's game ended, unless he believes video games and simulations are literally the same thing. His opinions are lazy, his editing is lazy, his articulation is lazy, everything is so damn lazy. Write a script, read it over, and then modify it where it needs it. It's not that hard to do that. Now, like I said before, this whole video started with him telling me to go get raped, but there's a whole lot more to it than that. Now I know someone might say, well, he didn't technically tell me to go get raped, but even if that mattered, which it doesn't, it's still heavily implied. The real thing that bothers me is just how middle of the road that reply was. It wasn't over the top in how spiteful it was, nor was it even remotely on topic to the discussion at hand. Unless he genuinely believes his opinion can save anime, and that mind calling his opinion out as lazy, mindless, uneducated garbage that it happens to be is hurting the anime industry. Which, for the love of all that is good in the world, let that be what he was really saying. This mild sidestep was just depressing for me, and the fact that someone making fun of him for being bald provoked such a more powerful response from him over me claiming he's on the same level of those he's mocked just left a sour pit in my stomach. To not care at all about your opinion and perspective to that extent and still claim superiority to people who are likely your peers made this personal. And I do have to apologize because my response was done to make sure he didn't reply to give me the justification to make this video. And that is a nice segue to my next point because the whole otaku bait thing was a reference to another video of his. So he bought this guy's book and then proceeded to purposely review it harshly rather than be intellectually honest. So the very first thing he says about this random novel is that the cover is otaku bait. Now, ignoring the fact that he doesn't know what otaku bait is, or he thinks just about everything is otaku bait, making that a meaningless statement, just a little further into the video he talks about a paragraph being repeated word for word. Now, I've said this about many different things and many different people, but with a mistake this blatant showing up, why the hell would you bring up something as pointless and incorrect as this image being otaku bait? No matter how valid and sound your points might be, the fact that you were so willing to present something this stupid guts all of the credibility you've created. And then this is wonderful. He is either proud about this comment, or he's boasting about doing something that is ethically and morally right that requires no effort on his part. Now let's talk about the titles of some of his videos because that shit makes no sense. He has this series, I guess, where he talks about random crap in anime, and these are the 2-minute videos. But the titles just make no damn sense. And if it was just that, I wouldn't have a problem because my titles are normally pretty dumb, but for most of his videos he has a title, and then a subtitle that's supposed to be more descriptive, but it never is. Now, I haven't watched a lot of these, so maybe I just picked the worst of them, but this seems to be a trend between them. First, a few that I haven't watched yet. Premise and framing. How in 2 minutes have you discussed how these two words correlate, and if you have done so, why the hell is it not called framing? World building and definition. If you were going to spend a minute 20 defining world building, why is that even in the title? Sequels and story development and character development. Now, this time you gave 6 minutes to the discussion, which is better, but you are also tackling two different topics that require much more time than he is given. But why isn't this called story development and character development in sequels? Seems like that was the obvious way to go. And there's this whole list of other things, but let's move on to the stuff I can actually comment on. Now this one is a gem as this title has nothing to do with this content. Not even a second of this stupid video has to do with the big picture, and Gintama having no story is nothing more than a fledgling insult that does not provide evidence towards his arguments. If I was going to rewrite the title to actually fit the video and his mannerisms, it would be double standards, parentheses, why all of you are fucking pretentious plebs with autism. Because outside of being a mentally retarded child with no understanding of the shit he's talking about, he's also an avid 4chan user, and for some reason keeps using a word that he clearly does not know the meaning of, unless it's him using it incorrectly on purpose. The video is actually about some random series being based off a visual novel that has a sex scene in it. For some reason, this has caused a debate on whether or not the game is a porn game, which is bigoted way of putting that, you bald fat fuck. And our not snob has reasons for injecting himself into said discussion, and rather than argue that, he then presents this false dilemma where if the game isn't porn, then this random series doesn't have a story, which is incorrect because it's a TV show, meaning it has a story. How do you not know something that fucking basic? Google it, you lazy whore. Now I'm sure there is a little overlap between the fans of the two anime, but the argument you have presented is that multiple fan bases, and their multiple perspectives, and vastly different points, derived from completely different topics, somehow are interdependent with each other. Now again, I'm going to remind you that this may in fact be correct, since I haven't consumed either of them. But I'm going to have to assume it's not, because this video fell down the fallacy tree and hit every single branch on the way down. And just a quick point before we move on, why the hell would the quality of a work, no matter what medium it is in, be dependent on what the content is classified as? Whether or not it's porn shouldn't matter at all, because porn isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a classification, a genre. You'd think I wouldn't have to tell this to a fellow reviewer, but I guess I do. Moving on to the video that motivated me with the oh-so-witty rape comment, this video is about Joey removing a video. And rather than call it something apt like intellectual integrity, you pretend it has something to do with the fucking retarded concept of the anime mafia. Oh no, fanboys don't like it when you make fun of the crap they like. This is such a new concept that hasn't been seen before. But let's ignore the video, because what's juicy is in the comment section, and it's not that rape comment either. First we have this gem. That's what happens when art is considered sensual instead of inspirational. Now, in order to properly explain this, it would take hours, so I apologize ahead of time for not going over this in the detail it requires. But apparently this guy likes talking about things well beyond his means and then doesn't explain his position at all. Some of the most best and most influential pieces of art to be created throughout history have been sensual pieces. I'm not sure if you're being a bigoted asshole, or if this is just you being that fucking stupid, but either way, this is ridiculous. Now, I love Gantz, and it's my second favorite manga of all time, but that shit isn't deep at all. It's just a fun mess of gratuitous violence, and that's all it is. My number 3 and 4 are completely different, with them being deep and aggressively intellectual, and that is how it should be for everyone. Now, I'm not saying Gantz should be on your list, but if you don't have that mix, either you've never tried anything else, or you're a stupid, bigoted person who really doesn't put any effort into figuring out what he actually likes. But that is nothing more than a snide comment coming from a person who just says shit to seem more intelligent than he actually is. This next one is a little more on the hilarious side. He didn't make a following video on that. Alright, this is just wonderful. So if you can't read, this is referring to the fact that Joey taking down his entire video was because of bad journalism rather than pressure from any fan base. And this line, coming from the not snob himself, is blaming Joey for not fact-checking Snob's video. A fucking Joey! How he not make my job easier by making sure all his critics are directly informed of all of his actions at all time? And just to prove my point, I'm going to, right after I finish typing this line out, figure how long it will take for me to see if that claim was correct or not. 43 seconds, you fucking worthless cunt. You are such a fucking lazy piece of shit that you can't spare 45 seconds to do the most basic of research to see if what you were talking about was even fucking relevant. If this doesn't prove my points for you yet, get the fuck away, because you are not capable of the most basic of thought, and you were so busy sucking off that bald, incompetent bastard that you can't even hear a single word that I've said. Hell, I thought that would take at least 5 minutes, but damn. Either I'm fucking amazing or that was really easy. Now, just in case you believe that I have yet to prove his incompetence, I have saved the best for last. He has this series about sharing good tips for writing, and it's wonderful. Now, this is where him being a troll will be the greatest thing I've ever seen. But as I interact with him more and more, it becomes even a smaller possibility, so I'm not sure if it's even possible anymore. To trick so many people into listening to some of the dumbest things ever said about writing and have it be considered intelligent and proper would be a beautiful thing. But I'm guessing it's not that glorious, and instead it's just a mixture of sad and funny. Each and every point he makes falls into 3 categories. Either it's extremely obvious, and these sorts of things should be apparent if you're not stupid or at the very least had any form of education. The most generic and generalized advice you could possibly give to the point it becomes meaningless and just wastes people time to hear it. And the last is him saying something profoundly stupid. Well, the very first point that is presented is incorrect for so many reasons, but that doesn't stop him from being pompous. The text around the excerpt is not really related to what is being shown, meaning this has gotten off to the wrong foot. But then he states this is how the writing starts, and he discusses how bad it is. Now, this is the most understandable thing he said in all of the videos I've seen, but that still doesn't make it right. Ignoring the possibility that he's the most impatient prick on the planet, meaning he literally has to be immersed by the first paragraph, he has picked up this mentality from all of the anime he's watched throughout the years. The only problem is that the pacing from manga and anime has this artificial construct placed upon it. For those of you who don't know, A vast majority of manga is designed around what can condescendingly be referred to as a popularity poll. This system that somehow measures quality influences every manga created, even those that never come in contact with the system. This generally means you get 10 free weeks, and if by then you haven't developed a following, you will get cancelled shortly after that. I'm sure I don't have to explain how that might force the idea of good pacing to become a very specific thing to ensure survival, and that might not reflect correctly on what actual pacing should be. But just in case I'm wrong, and his need for immediate immersion isn't related to anime, I have to ask, do you read books? I'm saying this because there are hundreds of thousands of books, and there tends to be a lot of variation between them in a lot of different aspects. The idea that you have to start a book off with explaining the characters and the setting within the first few paragraphs makes me question if I'm even alive and if all the books I've read in the past were just implanted memories. It's a novel. You know, those things that are 500 pages deep? If there is a medium that lets you take your time in establishing things, it's probably this one. There is nothing wrong with the way this guy started his story, and the fact that it's only 2 pages in that he explains the stuff that Not Snob wanted explained makes me ask, why the hell did you even bring it up? There's nothing wrong with the way this started. Well, I guess there is some errors. This needs to be a period and not a comma, and that needs to be capitalized. And there is no reason for this being here, and just about everything here needs to be rewritten. But in theory, this should be perfectly fine to start out with.
The first thing that is established is that the main character has a friend named Maria. It is revealed through an internal monologue, a very dry way to be informed about something so important such as this.
Is that really important? Because I get the feeling that's not all that important, and it's just something that needs to be spoken once. And again, this is such generic advice, it's not even helpful. Yes, some relationships should be established with actions, but there are a large variety of relationships that are perfectly acceptable to establish with words alone. And that actual, if it is implying some things, is saying a lot of crap. Without context, I can only evaluate so much, and since you're unwilling to expand on your arguments, I have to assume your problem is with this, which isn't so bad until you ignore this. Unless this is never referenced again, that is most certainly action.
This though does not mean that you cannot show them being best friends by the way they talk to each other, or the fun they have together. Spending a few paragraphs on their activities can establish that without having to say it out loud.
Sure, but she didn't say it out loud. And again, something happened before this, and whatever that happens to be is informing this internal monologue. So your example could be completely off base for all we know. Now, he's not wrong, but there are 2 problems here. First, he hasn't presented a way to make this better, and that's because he can't, as he soon will prove in his next tip. But then he ignores the fact that if taken too far, it becomes an even worse problem. If you use words and phrases that are too obscure, then you run the risk of sounding pompous. And if that's not even a factor for you, if you are not capable of adding enough context within and around each sentence whenever you use these terms, you will alienate most of your audience, and whatever you were trying to get across will not be understood. And the second point is, what is wrong with this example is not weather being repeated. I'm not going to explain what is actually wrong, but the weather is a mild inconvenience compared to it. Or maybe it's just the weather, and it's so out of context that I'm simply incorrect. Alright, this one he is also correct, but in a manner that makes him look rather dumb and uneducated. Now, if you're going to agree that boring isn't an extremely subjective term, which we wouldn't, but for the sake of the argument we will, all that means is this is boring but readable, and your rewriting of it is interesting but not in the way that you had intended it to be. Because remember, interesting doesn't mean being good. Fucking look up words before you use them, mate. So, how did the Not Snob fuck this up? So what was originally there? It's 2 characters dumping dialogue back and forth in a formulaic manner, which at the very least gets the job done and clearly displays the information. You know what you're trying to do. Does the Not Snob do this? Well, of course he doesn't. He thinks shuffling the information around in a haphazard manner makes for more entertaining reading, which it doesn't. Now, in a casual read, you might pick up on the fact that the student stabbed the teacher, but you'd be fucking lying if you said that you got that on your first read. He changed the format from 2 people speaking, and now it's 4 people who are speaking. Because if it was just 2 people talking back and forth, they sure did forget what the fuck they were talking about right in the middle of that fucking conversation. Then the first 3 lines are spoken by a single person, because I'm desperately trying to make the Not Snob look a little better here. But the second and third line need to be swapped for readability. Unless someone who has at least some evidence that a kid killed himself would respond saying, unsurprisingly, when of course no one saw him because he fucking killed himself. and then a third and fourth person chime in with questions about the conversation at hand. If you wanted to establish reverse order, why didn't you just do that? You nullify the argument when you modify the format so completely because now it's something different, and worse. After a bit of advice that is so obvious it doesn't need to be spoken to the general audiences, we hit the fucking gold mine of all gold mines. Nothing is correct about this. Nothing makes any sense, and the worst part about this is that it doesn't take that much to easily undermine the points that are being presented. I have no clue what he's talking about when he says first person and second person, because he's not talking about point of view, and even if he is, he's using these terms to discuss the character's alternating perspectives, and not the actual writing's perspective, which isn't what you use that for. But ignoring that, we have all of this garbage. Now, if you're unaware, perspectives are the same as the rules of capitalizing the first letter in a sentence and hitting the spacebar after you finish typing a word. This is part of the formatting of writing, basic foundation for you to build the rest of your work on top of. These aspects do not inherently hold values to them that would modify the tones of things. Of course, they can if you want them to, but that could be said about most things in writing. Now, if you don't already believe that statement, let me prove with some examples. Not that long ago, my uncle passed away, and I ended up going to both the showing and the funeral. During this, I walked up to my aunt and I told her that I was sorry for her loss. And you know what she did? She started hitting me with her purse and calling me a selfish bastard and screaming irrationally. But who could blame her? Who in their right mind would say something as selfish as, "I'm sorry for your loss" at a funeral? Or how about "those guys are the best friends I've ever had"? Well, obviously I just lied to everyone, because if I cared at all, I would have phrased that as "you guys," even though I wasn't talking to my friends. And then we have the most intimate and passionate thing I could possibly say. Do you want fries with that? Or, how about, do you want to split a pizza? He does have a point if you ignore the raping of the written word, but he's so misguided. You should, in fact, pay attention to the implications of what you are typing, because they do affect how things come across to the reader. But let's keep our head on, man. Then one more obvious point before we get to the last point made. And it once again starts off having nothing to do with the example provided. But then again, you couldn't establish this without a few screen caps, and that's just too much work for the not snob to handle. But to the actual advice, we have another generalization that is completely useless to anyone hearing it. His point is that the character is nothing more than her powers or some sort of thing along that line of thought, but that only undermines his entire rant, because that's not what's written there. If taken literally, what is written is to not have the characters change at all because of the conflict, which is obviously wrong. Or this is incredibly specific, and whatever anime he's referencing, when they use their powers, they change in personality completely, and in that case, you can still do that, but there needs to be something outside of it as well, but he never mentions that. Either way, he doesn't explain himself well enough and leaves out points that would improve this video series. There is another 5 videos at least on this topic, and it's the same over and over again. And if I remember correctly, it gets worse. But by the end of the day, it's the same 3 things every time. Obvious points, generalization past the point of usefulness, or incompetence. So I'm just going to let this be the end of it, and if you want to see for yourself, you're more than welcome to see if he actually gives good advice. But with this final act, this is the end of it for me. Probably should have done that a while ago. So to sum all of this up, that anime snob is a more incompetent version of Watch Mojo. Ha! Yay, end of the video thing in which I go off script and just babble on for 20 minutes and don't do anything productive. Yeah. And this is just a heads up, because I most certainly, this video is not me going, hey, you better watch out, Fat Man Falling, you better watch out, your movie sucks, you better watch out, I hate everything. It's not that. It's me saying, because it's essentially, because the point of the video is the fact that we will have that overly angry critic, like overly angry and overly coarse and overly verse people who create conflict through their reviews. Like, it's like, the point of this video is that eventually we will become anime snob. Like, that is an eventuality if we don't watch ourselves. If we go unchecked, if we go unthinking about what we're saying and what we're doing, we will eventually hit that anime snob level of incompetence. And so this wasn't a video of me going, oh, Fat Man Falling, you better not. No, this was a video of me going, hey, I better watch myself. And it was me attacking a guy because, I don't know, he's an asshole. I don't know, he thinks rape's funny, I guess. I don't know. I just did what I normally do. Well, with that said, might as well get to the actual ending of it. Ha 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 ha. So, because this video was put up next, I'm not going to do my feminist frequency video next, because I think 3 videos in a row of me just screaming about stupid people on the internet is not good. I think you guys prefer like actual content instead of just me bashing stupid people. So I'm gonna let this kind of go up in that. So I'm gonna let you guys choose what's gonna come next, and I'll give this a couple days, probably like Christmas. Like once Christmas is done, that's when a bit or whatever. I don't even know when this is going up. Who knows if I'm gonna be lazy or not and actually finish editing it. But whatever. But I've got 2 options. We can either do the next Ruby review, which will probably be episode 2 through 4. 2, 3, 4? Yeah, 2 through 4. I'll probably review all 3 of those episodes collectively, or I'll do another manga review, so I'll let you guys decide what it is. Well, I'm not going to... The manga review would probably be the Double Dragon. The Dragon Ball Z After the Future manga review, because that'll be easy and fast in order to do and all that fun jazz. So I'm going to let you guys choose that. You can just drop it in the comment section below, whatever you want. And if not, I'll pick something at random. Probably, I don't know what it will be. I want to do both of them for completely different reasons, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So thank you for watching. I'm sorry that was so long, but boy was it fun. Adios, and thank you for sticking around and watching.